Morning, everybody, and welcome to this edition of CIO Yarn Live. I'm your host, Ryan the Lion, and our special guest today is Andrea Black from the mighty Waikato. Welcome on board today, Andrea. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Ryan. A bit of a frost down here this morning, but got my cup of tea, so all good inside at the moment.
Yeah, good cuppa. Well, actually, I'm from Dunedin, so I know what a good frost is about, but living in Auckland for the last 20 years, so I can't say I got my tea, but I do have my water. And looking forward to a really good yarn today about our three big questions. So that's the culture, technology, and lesson. But of course, as always, if we could ask you to introduce yourself, AFQY styles, which is meet the person. So a bit about you outside of work, and you can wrap in a bit of work as well. Over to you to give us a bit of who is Andrea Black.
Cool, thanks, Ryan. So as Ryan said, I'm based in Waikato. I have been here for probably about 25 years now. So it's a little bit of my second home. And the reason why I call it my second home is because I have competitively ridden horses all my life. And when I was a youngster, which is a few years ago now, I did a lot of my competition work in the Waikato, and Waikato to me really is horsey central. So I originally come off a sheep and beef farm in North Taranaki, which, loved the lifestyle there. And growing up there, went to boarding school, and then from there actually started my work life. So I actually didn't go to university and the University of Life, which everyone else is, but I don't actually have a formal qualification. And from there, obviously went through a few other jobs and finally ended up at my role where I was previously, currently on a break. And as I said to Ryan before, loving it, and certainly been enjoying this beautiful autumn weather that we've had down in Waikato as well. Quite sporty, played a lot of sports through my life, but horses have been my main passion that I've had. I've got an old timer here that I've had for 17 years, coming up 18 years, and I've just got myself a young one last year that I am looking forward to doing some training on. Love the thoroughbreds, so they've had their useful or maybe not quite so useful life on the track, and now I'm looking at sport horse, doing some sport horse stuff with them. So yeah, really cool.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. So hey, we'll get into my questions in a moment, but that one there is actually from David Hallett. So it's come up with LinkedIn news, which I think means, David, you need to follow the AFQY page for your name to show up. But I think Dave's into his horses, and what types of breeds are you riding?
Yeah, so as I just said before, so I really do like the thoroughbreds. I think that they're extremely athletic, and I just like the personality. I've trained pretty much all my horses that I've had, so it's a lot of fun. I'm very lucky here. I've got a 10-acre lifestyle block just outside of Hamilton, set up with an arena and lights, although I don't need those at the moment because, as I said, I'm not working. Let me just reiterate that point. So I get out and can enjoy the sunshine and working during the day as opposed to at ends of the day.
Well, I might have to invite myself down, not so much for myself, but my wife happens to be a horse rider herself, but hasn't ridden for a while. And she had a horse, which I think, excuse my ignorance, but I assume, well, not necessarily a thoroughbred, but was a brother of, what was our famous equestrian, Mark
Todd.
Mark Todd. For some reason, I had a different name. I had Mark, but the horse is a brother of his famous horse that won all the gold medals. And
Charisma.
Yeah, Charisma, brother or something, but related. And famous stories of her horse, which was quite a massive horse, and it would come charging down from the paddock and jump the fence and turn up beside the car and nudge the window, go, hurry up, I want to go for a ride, and take her racing down the field before they got started on their training. So fantastic. And Maggie Hardcore, didn't realise that.
Well, officially kind of South King country, but we always called ourselves North Taranaki, and New Plymouth was the closest. We're now north of New Plymouth, so we were a little bit remote. 3,000 acre sheep and beef farm, and the top farm that we had, that she'd been actually we've still got it, we're selling it at the moment, has been in the family since 1900. So and it's going to stay in the family, which is quite cool. We're the only, Black is the only name on the title, so yeah, it's actually quite cool. So no one in my side of the family is farming, but my cousin's sons are going to purchase it later this year. So it's quite cool to keep it in the family. A little bit of sentimental value there as well. So yeah,
I can imagine. And the last one before we crack into the work stuff is the School of Hard Knocks. So I'm part of that club. In fact, I dropped out of uni twice. I was top of the top class. I meant to be some doctor or invent some laser or something, but I really couldn't stand all the subjects I had to do, and really enjoyed art. So I became an art director. But yeah, what was your path? Because it's what I find is really good story here is for those, because we get this across all different channels, for any young people who might be thinking, oh, I haven't done university, or I haven't done this, how could I ever be, achieve what Andrea has? It's really good for them to understand that, yes, you still can get there. So in terms of your path, a few things happened, a few decisions, a few opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't go to university. So as I said, I came off a farming background, and I love, so as I said, I've said 10-acre lifestyle, but I actually love farming. I'm probably a little bit old now to get into it. It's a relatively, it's a little bit hard on your body. But back then, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was full into horses at that stage, and I was competing most weekends. So being home on the farm was quite cool for me as well. And that's what I did for the first 6 months. And at that stage, I actually started, as they're known now, with PGG Wrightson, and I started on an internship. And I will let you know that my salary the first year that I worked was, I think, $9,000 a year. So I was hitting it home. So it's a little bit different to what it is today. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit, it's a little bit tougher. You can show my age now. A little bit tougher with people these days, where I think companies are looking for qualifications and things like that. But I think we need to look a little bit broader than just those quals. Look, my journey was, like, I didn't start in technology, didn't take technology, wasn't a thing at school where I went to. So I didn't get into it at that stage, where I think we had a whole lot of Apple computers that you had to boot up sequentially, and dot matrix printers and things like that. But worked through Wrightson. Yeah, I know, it's like I am going back now. Worked through Wrightson and got into just doing some computer. We're just looking at some systems that we were bringing in, and got into it that way, really. I was a pretty logical thinker, coming off the farm, got taught to fix most things myself if I needed to, and that's how I got into technology. So I got into on the ground floor, computer technician, built servers, engineer, and at that stage I made a bit of a decision whether I wanted to kind of stay on the tools or whether I wanted to go down a different path. Shifted around a little bit with Wrightson. Started in Taranaki, went to Tamaranui, and people say, oh, Tamaranui, great years there. It was probably, I was in my early 20s at that stage, and a really fantastic community of young people. And from there, I went down to the Big Smoke in Wellington, and that's where I kind of got into the technical side of it. From there, came back up to the Waikato. I didn't enjoy Wellington with riding horses. A, I had to travel a long way to get anywhere, and B, it felt like I was riding in a wind tunnel all the time, so it was quite hard. So yeah,
everyone in Wellington saying, "What are you talking about?" Wind tunnel?
I love going down there, and I was down there, took a couple of weeks, and went down and stayed with my sister. It was fantastic. Bluebird days in Wellington, and they're amazing. But having horses down there and riding in that all the time was not that pleasant at times. So that was interesting, yeah. So Waikato, as I said, second home. Started with ECNZ actually, as they were going through the deregulation of the energy industry, and was there for a year, got made redundant. So that was probably one of my big learnings, and a big thing as well. I had to go through it. It certainly toughened me up a little bit, and I think some of the lessons I learned out of that kind of put me in good stead, like, throughout my career. So I would have been probably mid to late 20s at that stage. Yeah. At that stage, I went into, diversified a little bit, went into kind of the vendor side, and I was there for probably about 10 to 12 years. So I worked for Fujitsu, as they were, Dimension Data, Genii, who became Spark. So I worked for a few of the for the biggies, and did service provision, engineering, different things, and got into the more relationship type things. And then I was lured back to Genesis, and I was there for 6 years. Started off looking after the service desk and desktop teams, went up to operational manager, up again into GM role, and then I made the shift to LIC. So look, it is there. I think if you want to do the hard yards, I think employers and people, like, we need to have a look at how people want to work, and they've got the capacity and the ability to adapt and learn things, because it's the people skills, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. I think that make people, the technical stuff, I think, is, so long as you've got the aptitude and the ability to learn that. I think that's the simple things to learn. It's interesting technology.
So we talk about having aptitude, and there's always been this big debate around, I go back to when I started in IT officially in 2005. Even back then, there was a group of CIOs who were trying to work with the tertiary institutions to change the curriculum, because when the young ones came out of uni after 3 years study, they weren't ready to jump in. But people like yourself who've been started on the tools and learnt on the tools, as you could say, were much better suited. So that's been a long-going debate ever since. But we now have a range of organisations that are doing 16-week or 3-month courses and getting people into work much sooner. Of course, with our skill shortage, global skill shortage, the sooner we can get people into work, the better. So 3 months versus 3 years is pretty enticing, both for employers and employees. So the vocational experience-based learning is a great way to go. But with that, trying to keep it on time, because I can be a bit, I can sit here and talk all day about all sorts of things. But let's get into our first big question, which is around culture. So what we like to ask about is, for you as a leader, what do you do to help actively build culture? And what are some of the experiences that you've seen work and not work over time that you'd like to share with us?
It's such a good question. I can't say it's a good question, but it is. And I think culture is really personal as well. I think culture kind of espouses who you are as a person, and what you bring to the table, because no one person is the same. And I think that's what, kind of builds the magic that you have where you're working with people and with teams, and what you bring. And I think, I'll probably jump around a little bit, but with, one of the lessons I learned, earlier on is actually, so authenticity is just so huge, and bringing yourself to work as you are. I kind of look old school, and I go, there are a lot of people that are kind of older managers, and I'm actually put myself in that realm from an age perspective, but I'm trying not to do it from a mind perspective. That they're one person at home and they're a different person at work, and I just don't do that. I am who I am, and I try to be that person at work and at home. I'm a single person, a single entity of myself, and it's around drawing people into your circle, working with like-minded type people as well. I think is incredibly important to do that. So kind of that authenticity, and I learned early on when I was kind of in my, I would say management, my management time, when I was kind of probably still learning the ropes. So I had a bit of a tricky employee, and I asked for some advice from someone that was really experienced, and he was like, right, you need to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, got it. And I got in there and I went, I did this, this, and this. And then they said something, I went, shit, I don't know what to do now. So it's kind of like, you can take the advice that you want from people, but you've actually got to lay your style across it and be really true to yourself, which shines through kind of in your integrity and that authenticity piece that you have as a person. I just think, and that's why it's personal, because we're all so different. We've all got different personalities. We're introverts, we're extroverts. Some of us like the detail, some of us like the big picture. It's just so different on how people lead and what they do, and there's so many nuances on it. So I think that's a big piece to me. So I certainly try and show up every day and be who I am at home and at work. I'm not a different person.
Can I jump in and say, I really love hearing that, So,
Yeah.
I obviously have my nickname Ryan the Lion on LinkedIn, and a lot of people go, "What's going on, mate? This is professional social media." And to your point about being the same person, being authentic, the connection there, and why I love what you're saying so much is that we have our nicknames with our families, our teammates, all these things outside of work. And you said be the same person inside outside. So I use that. Works really well as a marketing thing because people can't forget it, unfortunately for them. But the message is that, let's remove those masks that used to be part of corporate and be our true authentic self. So hearing you say it is complete magic for me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Of course, the other side that you're talking about is that, and I hadn't been able to put a label on it. So you've really given me something there about that culture is so personal depending on who you are. Because yes, there's all these textbooks that say do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and here's the best practice, and here's this. But in actual fact, you've got to put it, apply yourself to that, as you mentioned. So I think that, really great advice. Great.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think that's cause and effect as well, to a certain degree. So, I kind of look back at my last two roles that I've had, where I had a place where I was pretty relatively positive energy, quite adaptive to change and trying things, where I went into somewhere that was a little bit more conservative. I remember what they did, probably had some bad experience. So coming from quite a kind of a you're going to say this, but we're not going to trust you with what you're saying. So actions speak louder than words. And it was really interesting just having a look at those different things. So there's, depending on your circumstances that you're in, or the company where you're working, or the team that you're working with, you actually just have to kind of change some of those things a little bit. Yes, Andre, you do need to temper your personality occasionally, but in general, like one of the things I was reading that one. One of the things that I learned, and it was one of the things that came actually when I worked at Wrightson originally. So when I originally started working at Wrightson, I was what they called a stock clerk, a livestock clerk. So I actually went out to all the livestock sales, recorded all the information, the sales and purchases, and then did all the billing for all that, and the credit notes and everything like that. And I loved it. It was fantastic. But the one thing that I got out of that was that I could actually talk to a full range of people. So I talked to farmers about what was going on, normally starting with the weather, as you did. But then also, if I had to talk to, bosses or the accountants or other people, it just gave me this real raft of people that I can relate to in different ways. So I certainly think there's, at times, you probably have to temper the kind of the outer buffer of your personality, but I think you still have to be really true to who you are and let some of those things shine through as well. It's really important.
So I agree, and I have an answer that might help you, Andre. So Andre, it looks like Andre's a colleague or a mate, and I don't know if tailor's the right word because it depends on your definition. But when I'm doing LinkedIn training and talk about personal brand, and there's this big argument around there shouldn't be a personal brand because you've got to be true and authentic. And it's like, well, I am true and authentic, but here's my version of that. When I'm at the rugby club, the language I use there is not the same language I'd use with my grandparents. And the language I'd use in the workplace will be slightly different, but probably more edging towards what I'd use with my grandparents most of the time. Sometimes I'll slip into rugby discussion somewhere along the line, but it gives you the idea that you're still the same person, but you just have a slightly different tone to respect the audience that you're with. Hence, you wouldn't catch me having a rugby changing room discussion like you would giving each other complete absolute ragging and tons of swear words in the workplace, because there will be people that don't appreciate swearing in the workplace, and you've got to be respectful of that, just as they will be respectful of other things about you. So yeah, you're still the same person, but you're just toning yourself to the audience without. So it's not about changing who you are, but more meeting the audience.
I agree. Yeah, that's absolutely right, Ryan. I think some of the language that I use, and I do have a swear jar at home occasionally, is you definitely need to temper that. And I think as you learn your audience, you need to read the room effectively, I think is a good way to put it. But you also need to push the room a little bit as well at times to actually, bring some of your true self into that a little bit more. So it's just kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit. Probably a couple of other things that I think about. So one of the things that's kind of landed with me, and certainly in my last role, people would come and say, "I know you're really busy," and it's like, "Oh, I really hate that." It's like, I'm just busy doing different things to what you're doing. So the big thing for me is respect of people's roles and what they do, because I kind of look at it and like, well, you know, they're probably going to take me out of the equation, and actually the engine room that needs to happen is actually not me. I've got a broad view of what's happening, but actually the people that actually get the shit done, get the stuff done, it's not me. I'm the one that's kind of corralling, or as we say, creating the rumble strips for what we need to do, and trying to sort some of these things out. So, you know, I always never tried to say I'm the CIO. It's like I lead the technology team. So, and a good friend of mine, words are really important, and how you use those words are just incredibly important for people. And it's subtle changes like that you can put in and that you can use. I'm not big into titles. I never have been. They make me feel awkward at times, and it's just like I'm a person trying to do my best for a team of people that are around me. And the biggest thing that I get out of it is actually, it's not about me succeeding. I'm successful if my team is successful. And it's about seeing those successes for people as well. That, you know, that you can see like the aha moments, or the really cool things that they've done, or they've hit something out of the park. They're fantastic. That really gets me going in the day.
I can imagine, and I can only at the moment liken it to coaching rugby, and I coach little kids, you know, the junior level and high school. And you know, when you start seeing them develop and having their moments, especially the ones that say couldn't tackle or scared of tackling, and then they have their aha moment and they become really good tacklers. So if I can liken that into the workplace, when someone's, you know, just learning something new, maybe someone who's come in and you know, just starting to pick up their role, and then you start seeing them pick it up and fly, and you're like, cool. And actually, one other thing that I've discovered is, Caro, who's here doing some of the notes, she'll have a laugh when I say this is when I let go. Learning to let go as a person in a, you know, lead position or responsibility, so that the others can actually do it. And the great thing, I don't know if you've experienced this, is that sometimes you sort of shit yourself because they're doing it differently, but then you actually get a better result, and after that you're like, oh, and that's the aha moment for me. I'm like, right, now what else can I let go of? Quick, let's just pile it all on. Because it gets quite exciting once you've had that moment of going from shit scared that they're doing it differently to, wow, it's even better that way. So crack on, team.
Yeah, I am. One thing as well, I'm very aware I'm not the smartest person in the room. There are a lot of other people that are much more smarter than I am. So it's about, and that's some advice I got from someone as well, it's about building that team around you, empowering that team, you know, building the communication. That was one of the big things that I was trying to do, certainly at LIC, was actually, you know, don't make assumptions, you know, ask the question if there's something you're not sure on, because that then leads to rumors and it leads down a track. You know, people do think forward at times when they go, actually, oh shit, someone said this, and it's like, all of a sudden they've got to worst case scenario, and actually the conversation was heading in the other direction. So it's, you know, try and challenge yourself to be able to ask those questions, certainly from a level of respect. You know, you don't want to, you know, you want to ask people and have that respectful conversation. And that's one of the things, is I always tried to be available to people, just to have that conversation. You know, it was as simple as actually just sitting in a common area in the tech space and had my lunch. Funnily enough, CIOs still need to eat. So, you know, there's kind of this, you know, there's this kind of stigma around, you know, title and CIO, but I look at myself as I'm just a person. I still need to sleep, I still need to eat, I still need to use the bathroom, just as any other person does. And I'm still myself outside of work, and I'm just a person. So it's kind of breaking down some of those barriers that actually, you know, how do you get rid of that hierarchical view to go and say, actually, we're equals in some of these things, you know, we're there to look at the big picture, and actually try and provide some of that guidance to people to go and say, actually, yep, here's where you need to be, but they'll bring a lot more to the table from a technical perspective and how you actually do some of those things as well.
And I love that you would go and have lunch in the lunchroom, because you're making yourself available like that, and making yourself visible as one of the team, rather than any sort of hierarchy, or you're always hidden away in the ivory tower type. I think is a cliche. It really sets the scene, because there's a couple of things like, those sayings like you are your environment, right? So if your environment is that your leader is always never available except when you're having a formal meeting, well, that can be a bit when you have your formal meeting. Whereas if they're hanging out in the lunchroom and having a bit of a laugh and, one of the team, then yes, you do become one of the team, more so, and it enables that collaboration, that realness, that authenticity. So that's excellent. So hey, just on looking at time, we are going to probably run a little bit late, but that's okay, because you're just going to head out and go for a horse ride after this. But let's jump onto the tech. So, understanding that you are now officially CIO of the horse team at the moment, having a good break and enjoying it. Let's look at it from a point of view of what are some of the curliest and some of the coolest tech projects you've been involved with. So the things that pop off your mind that you'd like to share as a bit of a story and a bit of anecdote, or a bit of a yarn, as we'd say here, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so curliest and hardest. I think I'll probably just go back to some of the things. Some of the things we've done the last couple of years. So I tuned in last week, and they were talking around COBOL, and it's like, oh, yes, there's quite a lot of COBOL in their environment. And if I probably look at a general term, I'm like, COVID's been bloody interesting for many reasons, and it's not finished yet. Like from a pandemic or perspective, being ill, but actually the way that it's changing the world and how we work, how we use technology, the way that we travel, all those things are changing, and it's still going to keep changing probably for the next couple of years. As the pendulum's kind of swung one way, it'll come back and then it'll settle at some stage. So I kind of look at that and go, actually, yeah, LIC as a company, like they're doing all the same things that anyone else is doing. Actually, they're having to focus on what's really important to them, and actually, going to cloud native technologies, all those types of things. That's pretty standard. I think a couple of things that I want to call out from a dairy perspective. They call them cow Fitbits, but wearables on cows to understand what their temperatures are, how many steps they're doing, could they be calving? There's a whole lot of there's a raft of things that's coming into there, and LIC's got a very well-known product in the marketplace called Minder. Got about 90% of New Zealand dairy farmers that use it. So we did some integration, with some of the wearables technology into Minder. And we had a very short time frame to do it. We had teams that were fully, immersed working on other stuff. So we had to actually pull people off and do that. So, and we hit the deadline. Actually, we hit it ahead of time, and we got MVP out ahead of the game, which was really cool. It's just it was a different way of working. And I think that's one of the cool things. If I go back to kind of people, process, and technology stuff's the easy bit. It's supposed to do what it says on the tin, then you get the process side of it, which is, actually how can you enable some of these things to happen from a team perspective or a company perspective, but then you have a look at, the people side of it, and that's how you bring people together to really hum and get some of those things done. And I think for me, it was cool from a technical perspective. Like LIC had a really cool product they could put out in the market, but actually the way that we did things differently, I think was a pretty awesome thing as well. And the fact that it had a direct connection to our farmers or to our customers was also really cool. Another one that we've got, another one that we had as well, actually going back to probably my days at Genesis, we had to do, I think it was a version upgrade of their billing platform. And I think they had a couple of cracks at doing this. I don't remember how much it cost, but it cost a fair bit. And using service providers to do that, so it brings in a little bit more complexity. I was looking after the testing team at that stage as well, and just trying to understand what we needed to do from a testing perspective was quite tough. And there were certainly a few, hours that went through weekends and weekdays to actually get some of those things done and pull in the test cases and actually try and get a really cohesive upgrade and test plan in place, and that went really well as well. We certainly had to hit the handbrake a couple of times, which is an interesting one. But that was pretty cool. A gnarly one that we had was probably one that we did, LIC was an internal upgrade project. I think originally, so this is well before my time, it was supposed to cost a couple $1 million. It probably cost 3 or 4 times that in the end. Had external service providers, came internal, still didn't have the teams that we needed. Didn't it was so big that over 4 years that we couldn't understand actually, or we need to remember actually what we're trying to achieve and why we're trying to achieve it, which is really interesting. I've gone through quite a few iterations, and we had to pause that one again and do a restock and actually break it right back down to the basics around what we were trying to do and actually get that across the line. We were probably still 6 to 8 months over time, and a lot of that came down to, interesting enough, testing as well. And it was just the fact of the importance that you have from a quality perspective that you needed, and how you actually ran the project from a company perspective as well, and the involvement out of, I don't want to say business and technology, but subject matter experts and how you brought them in into the team. But that one actually, as I said, took a little bit longer, but we went live into kind of peak season, which was a little bit tricky, and we certainly needed to do a lot of management, but the team did a fantastic job on that as well, kind of rescuing that from where it needed to be to get a cohesive product that's now supportable, because you don't just build it and it's done, it's you got to support it as well, is incredibly important for what you're doing. And that kind of that, so all of those were kind of old technologies to new. So certainly the LIC ones, we were going from, older, COBOL type technologies that have been around for 10 or 15 years, actually for even 20 to 25 years, and moving into cloud technologies. And the challenge that you've got is, LIC is a data company, it's got a lot of data that comes in, and you've got to maintain it in 2 areas. And how do you do that as well? And actually have a cohesive product that's going to work, to deliver to kind of peak demands for customers. So yeah, it's interesting on how you do some of these things.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's process and people. It's the technology is, it's what you do with it and how you use it. So that's why I kind of always put technology as kind of the small X, but your people and your process are the big stuff you need to try and work out, and how you can actually, that's the success piece of it.
Yeah. Wow. As you were sharing some of those stories, I was thinking of what those moments might have been like when they were happening, and certainly, yeah, some intense moments there. And I remember my brother's a software architect, and has architected 2 banking systems. And to your point about testing, when I was talking to him years ago, I said, how much time would you spend on testing? And he said, 70%. I was like, wow, I thought when you're writing a bank system, it would it's massive and be lots of more time spent on writing. And he said, well, it is massive, and there is a lot of time spent on writing, but we still do a lot more testing, because you don't want your money going to the wrong account, do you? And I was like, no, probably not. So yeah, that testing, making sure it works. And when you talk about people and process, that the testing aspect that fits into the process, but the people aspect of is everything tracking along, which comes back to our first question around culture, and is everyone fitting in together and working away nicely? So yeah, what a beautiful rundown of some great pieces of work you've been involved with over time. And it kind of segues into the lesson question, I think, by the sounds of it. I'm not sure if that is where you're heading, but let's head to question 3, which is, what is the biggest lesson you'd like to share with everybody? And this is intended as a bit of a mentoring question, especially for the younger people just starting and coming through. But of course, everyone will be interested to know. What have you chosen as your lesson?
It's a tough one, because there's been quite a few, it's fair to say. But I think the biggest lesson, and I mentioned it before, because at the end of the day, I'm a people-centric leader. I'm not a technology-centric leader. I understand technology. I've come off the tools. I understand how to join the dots. But the biggest one for me is actually being true to yourself and your authenticity. It really is. And at times, it's going to feel like you're swimming against the tide. And that's a really uncomfortable place to be. Yeah. But you've got to have some confidence in yourself, and understand why you're doing it. So it comes down to the why as well, and what you're trying to achieve, out of that. And with that, and you could probably go into, out of what I talked around some of the projects, that then comes down to actually, at times, I actually, as I call it, on that last one I talked about, I actually had to pull the handbrake and actually go and say, we just have to stop. And you've got all this pressure that's coming down at a business perspective, at a business level, all of business, technology is part of the business, let's make sure we keep that one where it needs to be. Saying actually, no, you've got to do it, you've got to go faster. And it's like, actually, reading the other way, sometimes you just got to slow down to speed up a little bit, which is really important. So, backing yourself and understanding yourself and why you're doing things, and what the importance is of those things, and the outcome that you're expecting to get out of it. Yes, it took us longer. There's never a single factor in what's going on. As I said, I talked about it before, cause and effect. It's a really interesting one. Something happens and you have to adjust to it. So it's kind of that level of flexible, being flexible, but actually having a level of inflexibility at a very high level to go and say, but this is where we need to head as well. But underneath that, you can kind of diverge, but you've got to come back at certain points. So I think, that authenticity and integrity piece, and for me, it's huge. It makes up kind of who I am. And as I said, everyone's different. From that perspective, is actually being able to, show up, and actually, and say, what you're going to do, what you want to do. I certainly know another one around that as well, and it just all comes around it, is actually, shit goes bad at times. I'm going to be the first person to go and say, yeah, I got that wrong, or actually we've got a problem here. Something needs to happen. Like, stuff comes back and bites you in the ass if you don't do something about it. So, do something about it if you need to, if something's not going right, because things have a way of, they come out. I won't say that I've learned that pretty heavily that way. Actually, a few things I probably did, I went, oof, we shouldn't have done that. But actually, it's just like, front up, because at the end of the day, I look at it and go, everyone comes to work to do their best job and do the best that they can for what they're doing. And I think if you've got and this is quite interesting, I think an important thing is choosing where you want to work as well, from a culture perspective, and does a culture fit where you want to be. If you've got that kind of support around you, then it does make it, you can actually have those discussions for what you need to. I remember when I first started at LIC, I think a few people have said to me, it's like, oh my God, you must have wondered what you walked into. I can remember, I'm lucky I come from an operational background, sitting with one of our guys on a call at midnight, and having to make a decision. The phone system had gone down, so farmers couldn't contact us. I've been there for, I don't know, 6 weeks maybe. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know that. There's a lot of stuff I don't know here. And they're like, we need to make this change. But we need to make this change. We don't know if it's going to absolutely stuff it or if it's going to fix it. And I was like, feeling quite uncomfortable. Middle of the night's pretty uncomfortable place to be when you kind of can't get hold of anyone. And I'm like, can you just try a little bit more stuff here? But it's, it is, it's fronting up on some of those things. From an operational perspective, it's never about what's gone wrong. It's like, right, what do we need to do to fix it? And then let's go and actually break that down afterwards. To go and say, how did this happen? Are there some common things here that we need to fix? Because when people are in the throes of it, they're doing their best, and there's of what they're trying to do to get it fixed. And your main aim is to get back, working for where you need, and then go back into it as well. So it's never a blame game. It's always a learn game. Obviously, if things keep happening again and people are negligent to what they're doing, then it's not a blame game. It's a different discussion. But actually, it's a you've got to learn from some of these things, and how do you do stuff better? And one of the things with training horses, and I'm not saying that I apply this tactics to people, is that actually you have to let them make a mistake. So you've kind of what they say, if you've got your 4 asks, your 4 levels of ask with horses, very soft, and then you get to the point where it's like, actually you need to do this, and then it's their job to maintain what you've asked them to do. And then, but you've got to let them make that mistake. If they go and say, you've asked me to do that, I'm going to stop now. And it's like, so then it's the correction. So it's not exactly horse training that I apply to people, and I certainly don't do that, but it's like, it's the same principle. It's like, you've got to give people the ability to, you know, learn and grow and actually make some mistakes and be there to support them and correct them in some of those things that they're doing. So that actually, that as a person they can grow as well, because that's how you get, you know, it's how you grow your future leaders, and you grow your support around you, that people get that ability to do things. Most people know when they've done something wrong, and they're like, whoa. And you want them to be able to put their hand up and go and say, yeah, stuff this up. And I'm like, okay, so what's next from that perspective? What are you going to do about it? And it's certainly, you know, that's a learn game, not a blame game. It's incredibly important.
Wonderful. I love that. I've never heard that phrase before, but I'm going to use it and quote you on it. That's the Andrea Black, the learn game, not the blame game. And yeah, look, it's an interesting thing, I think, for everybody, because when someone does make a mistake, yeah, you sort of melt into your shoes, or at least I like to think that you know, everyone would, because no one really wants to be in that position, right? And everyone wants to be on the other side, which is when things are succeeding. So yeah, I think it's a great bonding opportunity as well. This way I look at it is that you got to go through the trenches and come out of it on the other side. And that's the aim and hope and approach of what's going to be the result. So that's been a fantastic session today. I just want to say thank you so much for your time. We're a little bit over at 40 minutes, but hopefully those who are having their green teas in the frosty Waikato are enjoying this, as people around New Zealand and around the world. We get some quite good international viewership, and we've been watching the numbers tick up and down through various parts. So if you've been watching or going to watch, you'll see we've time-stamped key comments and parts that Andrea has mentioned. And just want to also take the opportunity to thank LINQ, who, once again, I forgot to mention at the very beginning of the show. I'd like to mention at the beginning and the end. So LINQ and Neil Calvert, who are a wonderful supporter and partner of AFQY, enabling this month's CIO YARN live. So thanks very much, Neil. And of course, to you, Andrea, our guest. Much appreciated, and some real gems, absolutely. And I guess, you know, should have kind of expected it coming from a farming and horse background. But the looking at the culture aspect, the authenticity and integrity applied to how you manage the culture for everybody, and the tech. You took us through some. I think you used the term gnarly. They must go back to the almost knacky hardcore gnarly. And of course, looking at the lesson, you know, it's the learn game, not the blame game. So thank you very much for your time. Really appreciated it. And just wanted to ask you to share your closing remarks with everybody. What would be your wrap up and takeaways for everybody?
Wow. So yeah, life's a bowl of chocolates, as they say. You never quite know what's going to happen. And I just think it's, for me, and I look at it, been working for 32 years now, it's a while, so I'm definitely showing my age. And I kind of go, gosh, there's some things I know now, if I had known them a little bit earlier, then would I have changed things? But I actually think, do you know what? It's the hard times that you've got to look at that actually shape you to the person who you are today. So certainly enjoyed being on here and having a chat. You know, it's not the wins, it's the losses that shape you, Ryan. You'll know that one from rugby training. They're the ones that you keep with you for a long time, and then they shape you as a person for what you need to. But don't give up, and there's so much opportunity. Certainly in New Zealand and the world as it starts opening up now for what you want to do, and look for the place that's going to suit you from a cultural perspective, because things are definitely changing and evolving as we go, and we don't know what the end game is going to look like. And great industry to be in, because they need technology to do it.
Absolutely. Hey, love that. You know, the closing markets, the losses that shape you. And yeah, with the world opening up, the opportunity for people to now go back and explore, right? So all the culture aspects and attributes are really important to keep the team and attract the team. But we're going to wrap up there. So thank you very much for this morning. It's been so good, such a good yarn. And hope you have a good time having a bit of a ride this afternoon, and the horse has a good time as well. So we'll say ka kite ana to everybody out there, and thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone. See ya.